Hello friends, it's Kayla. Welcome to my first video of 2020. I'm actually filming this on the first day. So, hi, Happy New Year. I'm still stuck in 2019 though because we're going to talk about all of my reading stats from last year. Let's get right into it and talk about how many books I read in 2019. They're all right behind me. I'm missing, I think, 6 in total that I couldn't gather in time for the video, but in total I read 154 books in 2019. Here they are in a stack. Here they are in a pile. And then I'm gonna do them organized by color because I've been really into book covers this year and like what color of book I've been reading. So I think the most amount of books I read were blue. But let's go through, like, here's the red books I read, less than I thought there would be. The orangey books I read, gold and yellow, some green books, some teal kind of books, then the blue books, the purple books, the pink books, the too many colors to categorize books, and the books with barely any color. I guess the black and white and gray kind of books are the ones that I read most as well after blue. And then as far as like what's appearing on the covers the most, I read a lot of books with night skies on the cover. Actually, my most common one is faces. So many faces. Some really close up, some just like full body. I read some books with animals on the cover, water on the cover, a lot of like houses and doors. I don't know if these are trends in book covers currently or just trends of books that I'm picking up. Then I'll show you my notebook and just how I've kept track of the books that I read every month, besides Goodreads and my videos and my Instagram. I don't know why I do this doodle. I don't do a bullet journal anymore. Like, I don't do pretty layouts, but I keep this one page of organization. And then here it is organized by month. So like I said, I am missing 6 books. You can see my smallest stack, so the least amount of books I read this month was in February, but I'm actually missing, I think, 3 books from that stack. It still is the month I read the least amount of books, but the pile is smaller looking than it was in reality. The month that I read the most books was December, which if we're comparing to last year, looks ridiculous. Side note, if you would like a 5 years of reading stats video, I could totally do that. I just thought of it. I realized I've been here for 5 years. I don't have that planned into my 12 days of fa-la-la-la-la, but I could totally throw it in here if you'd be interested in some more nerdy stats. I don't use the words best and worst in regards to how many books I read, so I wouldn't say that like February was my worst month and December was my best month, because I'm not in a competition with myself or anyone else about how many books I read. So what I would say is my best and worst reading month would actually be May and November. If we're talking about 5-star favorite reads, I read 5 stars and 0 5 stars respectively. Speaking of 5 stars, let's do our first organization of this stack, putting them in different categories. So here are my 1 and 2 stars. I combined them. I only have a couple 1 stars. Sometimes it's hard to pick between 1 and 2, and I don't feel the need to call out books that are 1 star. I also don't really remember, and sometimes I change my mind between 1 and 2 stars. So I combined them. There's about 20 books there. In the 3-star stack, there's 35 books-ish. In the 4 stars, around 40. And then the 5 stars, which obviously, like, my photo didn't work out the way I thought and I had to go taller, so it's hard to actually tell the comparison, but there are less 5 stars than 4 stars. There's around 35 in total. And then I just wanted to show you all of my 5 stars in one picture, so I didn't have to say all the titles, but if you were curious, these are all of them. I also threw in a couple 4.5 stars in here just because, like, they're close enough. These are my highest rated and recommended books of the year. There are some books that I choose not to rate, like middle grade rereads, but my average rating for this year, not including those, which might have brought it down a little bit honestly, is a 3.7, which is the same as every other year. though I read 20 to 30 more books this year than any other year previous, I haven't really been reading more books I love or more books I hate, for that matter. Like, this was a normal reading year for me. Moving on to page count, I just cracked 50,000 pages read for the year. The shortest book I read this year was Sea Prayer, coming in at 63 pages. And the longest book I read was It by Stephen King at 1,136 pages. Here I've organized them basically from my shortest to my longest book, or at least organized by how many pages are in that book. So there's a section of under 100 pages, 100 to 200, 200 to 300, 300 to 400, which is my biggest amount, and then 400 to 500, and a couple books over 500 pages. My average page count in a book was 328 pages. This also means on average, I read about 136 pages every day this year. I definitely loved short fiction this year, and it's something I am thinking about reading a lot of in 2020. My favorite short books that weren't written for children are Elevation by Stephen King, My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyin Kim Braithwaite, The Test by Sylvan Newell, and Moon of the Crusted Snow by Wabgishig Rice. All of these falling around or under 200 pages. Like I said, I read a lot of middle grade, so that accounts for a lot of the short books that I read. Speaking of middle grade, organized by age range, I read about 75 adult and 60 young adult titles this year, and the rest were middle grade. I reread between 15 and 20 books in total this year. My favorite rereads of the year were, of course, The Raven Cycle by Maggie Stiefvater. I reread this every year, and it's my favorite series. I also reread the Everest trilogy and absolutely loved it this year. Including rereads, I read books from 80 authors that I've read from before, and around 70 authors that I've never read before, which I feel like is my most drastically different stat than everyone else I've seen making videos like these. It seems the majority of people are reading from brand new or debut authors. My numbers are pretty close, but I definitely read from authors. My comfort zone is reading from authors that I have checked out before and just seeing what they do next. Speaking of authors, my new favorite authors of the year. Obviously, I want to say like my 10 favorite books of the entire year. Those are all favorite authors. But I have this rule kind of in the back of my head that I have to have read and loved at least 3 books from an author before deeming them a favorite. So these are my new favorite authors of the year, in that I've now read enough books from them that I feel like I can put them in that category. I've given every Anna Marie McLemore that I've finished 5 stars. I've given every Seanan McGuire I've finished 5 stars. So they are now in my book of favorite authors, along with A.S. King, who's always been there because I read everything she writes and love almost all of it. My favorite debut authors of the year, authors that I read for the first time, were Rory Power and Wabgishig Rice. And from my top 10, the authors that I'm going to keep my eye on in the future are Mona Awad, Ruth Ware, and Riley Sager. I've read multiple books from all of these authors, but I haven't loved at least 3 books from each author, so hoping in the future that they become favorite authors. And then we've got the collaborative novels that ended up in my top 10, so I guess these are my favorite collabs of the year, and authors that I will check out or I have already checked out independently, which are Amy Kaufman, Jay Kristoff, Renee Watson, and Ellen Hagen. Authors that I read the most books from in 2019 were A.S. King with 4 books, Maggie Stiefvater with 5 books, and then I guess Gordon Corman with 3 books. That was the most surprising stat to me when putting together the numbers for this video. In previous years, I've done a lot of reading entire backlists of specific authors, but this year there was only 3 authors that I read 3 or more books from, and most of those were rereads. As per usual, I didn't read a ton of series this year. These are the sequels that I picked up this year. Some I liked, some I didn't. I started a couple series this year. Some I'll continue on, in most I won't, just because, like I said, I don't read series a ton. Next is my favorite stat, which is the genres I was reading. I read mostly mystery thrillers, My next most common thing, I don't even know. I started to I put together a sci-fi stack, right? And then I realized that some of the sci-fi was also fantasy, or some of the fantasy I was reading was also sci-fi. And then I was like, where does horror belong? In the thriller or in the speculative? So I just made this whole speculative pile. Technically, my highest read genre is this, but this is 10 different genres all within it. So I don't know what I'm doing. Next stack is just contemporary, I guess, real life, or maybe there's some literary fiction. Let's just, general fiction is this. Then I guess I'm calling this stack romance. I put the books that have a relationship at the forefront. Then I threw my historical fiction, non-fiction, short story collections, and poetry all just in a pile. So I would still say that the genre I read the most was mystery. A genre I read more from than normal, definitely sci-fi. And the genre that I read less of than normal was pretty much any genre that wasn't speculative. So less historical fiction than normal, less romance than normal, less nonfiction than normal, less anthologies than normal. The most common words found in the titles of books that I read this year are you, girl, and lie. Probably a direct result of my readathon where we read buzzwords in titles. Next is men and women that I read from. So I mostly read women authors. I read from more men than normal this year though. And then some non-binary authors I read from, and anything from like a collaboration and a mix. Now let's do release year-ish. Also like where the books originated from, where I gathered them from. Were they from my TBR shelf, from publishers, from the thrift store? So this is divided into 2019 releases versus anything not 2019. I just like to see how much new stuff I'm reading. It's actually a lot more even than you might assume. Now I'm going to separate these two things and discuss the stacks within them. So just focusing on backlist, no 2019. This is anything from 2018 or earlier. The oldest book that I read was the Nancy Drew I read. This is from like the 1930s. And the newest book I read, but not like counting 2019, was Elevation, which I think came out like November or December 2018. This is the ones that came from my TBR shelf that I already owned and got through this year. These are the ones that were from Book Outlet, so I got them this year and read them this year. I also have a couple books here that were sent to me last year that I didn't get around to reading until this year. And these are the ones that I bought from like the thrift store or Chapters or whatever, that were older titles and that I read this year. And then also some library books. Now back to the stack, 2019 and other. We'll divide it again, so we're on to 2019 only. Obviously all of these were acquired in 2019, so none of them were from my TBR shelf. These are all books that I accumulated in this year, starting with ARCs that were sent to me from publishers, and then finished copies sent to me by publishers, or it could have been from authors or agencies or whatever else. This is the stack of new releases that I found on Book Outlet. They are a sponsor of my channel. And then also some library books. And then besides books that were provided to me, ones that I picked up on my own and paid pretty much full price for because brand new releases that I just bought like on their release date, here's that pile. So of all the 2019 releases that I read in 2019, about 36 were sent to me to read in exchange for a review. 24 were purchased on my own, and 7 were provided by a collaboration. Now what I want to do from here is, I told you guys last year that I would keep track of all of the books that I hauled in a year with the intention of discussing how much money I spent on books in a year. Just more than anything because I was curious. So we're now moving on from like just talking about books I read in 2019, but these are all the books I hauled. in 2019. So first I have to kind of combine those two stacks, books that came out before 2019 and 2019 releases, because obviously I hauled all the 2019 releases this year, but I also did purchase or acquire some of the earlier titles. So this is all of the books that I now have hauled and read. They're still categorized into ARCs, final copies, book outlet, and ones I purchased. And then I have to add to every single stack books that I didn't read. I still hauled some more books from publishers that I didn't read. I hauled some books from book outlet that I didn't read. And I hauled some books that I purchased, thrifted or otherwise, that I haven't read yet. So this is everything more or less. I might have missed some stuff that I acquired this year. And now I'm gonna get rid of the stacks of ones that I didn't purchase. And this is the stack of books that I purchased in 2019. And I was a little surprised because I thought the number would be higher, but I spent around $600 this year on books. And that might be way higher than you might assume, but it was lower than I originally thought it might be. That's Canadian, so whatever your currency would obviously be different. I think if we're talking US, that's like $450. That's obviously still a lot of money, and I'm not like arguing that. And obviously I'm extremely like happy and grateful to be in a position to be purchasing books. Next, let's talk about countries. So I honestly forgot about my entire map. I haven't scratched anything off, so we'll do that together now. In total, I read from 19 different countries this year. Some of them I have already scratched off, some of them I haven't. I didn't make this a priority this year, so I am happy with the amount, but it obviously could be a lot broader. And I'm sure in coming years I will be more intentional with reading from more countries, because it didn't even cross my mind. I just read things that I'll always read things that I'm just interested in, but I'm sure I could go through, if I really made it a goal to like go through my shelves, I could find so many more things, so many more places, so many more voices. So this year we went to the United States. We visited Via Books Canada, went to Japan and Bangladesh, Ghana, read a book set in Pakistan, read a couple books set in Scotland, and a book set in Qatar. We've got Nigeria and Syria, Spain, all throughout the UK, Australia. I think the only place I really ignored, I guess, was South America. I don't read a lot of books from South America, so that's something that I'll consider for future reading years. Speaking of diversity, I know that I'm asked about how diverse my reading is, and honestly, doing stats based on that just makes me feel performative. I think like 40% of my reading this year was from a voice from another country, or somebody from a different culture than I, or somebody from the queer community, LGBTQIA+, authors from marginalized groups, or authors of color, or Native, Indigenous, or First Nations authors. And I hope that just my stats in general can show you those titles, rather than me throwing up a list of these are the South Asian authors I read this year, because I don't know why that just feels weird to me. I'm reading books that I'm interested in, and I'm reading diversely because those are the books that those are just the books that I happen to be interested in, and it's about calling attention to those authors rather than trying to call attention to myself and the diversity in my literature. If you have a goal to read from more varied voices, say you are looking for more Black authors to read in 2020, I hope I've done a good enough job of recommending those throughout the year, and better yet, find Black voices in our community who are recommending those books. Diversifying your reading, I think, can start by diversifying your subscription box. And with that, I'm going to give out some 2019 superlatives. They're going to include books, my videos, other people's videos, content creators, because outside of making an entire video at the end of the year about BookTube, which I don't plan to do, I have no other way of just discussing like this year as a whole with books and bookish content. So as far as my own content this year, I started some series. One of them was reading childhood favorites, which is one of my favorite things to film. So if you haven't watched those, highly recommend. I also started a series where I read like someone or a group of people for a week. I started with reading like a Visco girl, which is a video that is ridiculous. Talking about ridiculous videos, my most ridiculous video of the year was where books decided my life, in which I bought a brand new vehicle and went cliff diving because I flipped open a book and it told me to. I participated in a lot of readathons this year, including a couple rounds of Buzzword Readathon, the Scallywagathon, the Reading Rush, Dewey's 24-hour readathon, and of course my favorite readathon of the year was Spookathon. I did a couple experiments this year on BookTube. So I tried reading 116 pages every day for a month. You'll understand why if you watch the video. If I had to give that a superlative, it would be my video that made me question my own mind the most. I also did an experiment where I didn't rate books for a month. I was probably most excited to post because it was an experiment to see if you would notice as well, which just made it so much fun. I also did an experiment where I read the highest rated books on my Goodreads TBR and ended up with some of my least favorite books of the year in that video. I did a video where I read your recommendations. That was probably a superlative, the most nerve-wracking I've ever been to post a video because I hated some of your recommendations, but I love you so much. I also did books choose what I eat for 24 hours, which was the least amount of work that went into a video this year, which is really fun because it involved reading in no way. I think my favorite video of the year, weirdly, is the videos I've canceled chat that I had with you, because I think it gave you a behind the scenes of my channel and also my thoughts on everything. It was the most cathartic experience and I think gives you a really good idea of me and my content. Enough about me talking about BookTube. Here are some channels that I subscribed to in 2019 that I'm so happy started channels or that I found. Some of these people have been making videos for years and I've been doing myself a disservice by taking so long to find them. So linked down below will be Alexandra Roslin. She gets most aesthetically pleasing channel. Next is Books Are My Social Life. Sajid gets the superlative of, I don't know, most best favorite recommendations. I feel like we read so similarly and I am so glad I found him. Also, Chanel Time started making videos this year. I immediately asked her to co-host a readathon with me because I would give her the superlative of most growth potential. I see her just exploding. I think that she's gonna do some really cool stuff. She already has, but just amazing stuff as her channel grows, and I'm really excited to watch it. Library of Alexa is another find this year. I think she has been posting videos for just over a year, but she just is somebody that I go to when I just want to feel like a sense of calm and enjoyment, because she has such a lovely speaking voice and is very well spoken, and I love listening to her and everything that she has to say and share. Chandler Ainsley is another one that has just come out of nowhere as one of my new favorites. Like, I will watch everything that she puts out. I love her discussions. I understand now when people say to me, like, I don't read any of the same books as you, but I watch your videos. Like, she reads so many things that I would never even think to pick up, but I still just want to watch her every single day. And then just some other channels that I've been loving this year who I've already been subscribed to, but that I just love the content they were putting out this year. One of them is Ariel. I feel like I get a sense of her having a falling in love with BookTube moment, and I just love how consistent she's being and the type of stuff she's doing. Jessie from Bow Ties and Books, I think, is doing really smart, thoughtful content. My 1 and 2 true loves, Chelsea and Natasha, are two people who are the absolute first that I will watch. They're in my subscription box regardless of the video. I'm clicking on it. I always will. Also, Reading with Mo, I will always adore her channel. Read with Cindy, I love what she's doing. This Story Ain't Over, always an immediate watch. And Rachel Ray is an easy watch as well. Those are people who I have loved and hope that they do more and more, because I just want to watch their content always. Some more bookish stuff. We're not done yet. Is this video too long? I don't know. But I want to feature some books that didn't get a chance to get featured in my favorites video of the year. I talked about 10 books that I absolutely loved, but there are so many other like 4 and 5 stars that I want to bring attention to. So we'll go like by category. I didn't talk about any romance or relationship centric books in my top 10 because those just don't tend to make my top 10, but they do get 5 stars sometimes. So those were Love from A to Z by S.K. Ali, Tell Me How You Really Feel by Amina May Safi, and The Beauty of the Moment by Tanaz Batina. My favorite mysteries of the year are right here. I already talked about The Turn of the Key and Lock Every Door in my yearly favorites, but also My Lovely Wife almost made the cut by Samantha Downing, My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyenkan Braithwaite, and more family drama mystery Searching for Sylvie Lee by Jean Kwok. My favorite middle grade of the year, which middle grade, it's just really hard to make my top 10, but these were both incredible. Other Words for Home by Jasmine Warga and Hatchet by Gary Paulson. My favorite nonfiction of the year, which again doesn't ever make my favorites video, but it's still like incredible and I want to make sure I recommend, Eating Animals by Jonathan Safran Foer, How We Did It by Carl Subban, and Little Black Book by Otega Uegba. Amazing. Also some nonfiction, but we're gonna call this my short story or short essay collection, my anthologies. Anthologies, again, never make it in my top 10, but they're still some of my absolute favorite things. So on the more nonfiction side, we have The Fire This Time, edited by Jesmyn Ward, and Not That Bad by Roxane Gay. And then on the more fiction side, we have This Accident of Being Lost by Leanne Simpson, His Hideous Heart, edited by Dahlia Adler, and Hungry Hearts, edited by Elsie Chapman and Caroline Tung Richmond. Those all had amazing stories, thoughtful, inspiring, or just funny. My favorite kind of speculative or just weird things, besides obviously the ones I already mentioned in my top 10, I loved You Must Not Miss by Katrina Leno, and The Wise and the Wicked by Rebecca Potus, and The Dreamers by Karen Thompson Walker. Those were some, these are all some books that like were up for debate in my top 10. And my favorite like thoughtful books, ones that are contemporary stories that just have something interesting to say, some really fascinating characters, character studies, commentary on the world, really interesting family dynamics and relationships and friendships. I've got The Last Time We Say Goodbye by Cynthia Hand, which I highly recommend. Highly recommend all of these. With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo, Midnight at the Electric by Jody Lynn Anderson. And then a superlative of books that I just didn't talk about. Books that are underread. Even though a good amount of people are reading them, they're underread. They're under-recognized by, and under-talked about by myself, even though I loved them. On the Come Up by Angie Thomas and Come Find Me by Megan Miranda. These are both lovely books that I didn't quite give 5 stars, and so it's so funny how I feel like I end up talking about my 2 and 3 stars and 5 stars more than my 4 stars. I didn't get to feature a lot of these books that were 4 stars, but they're totally worth reading and worth talking about. They haven't had their moment. So this is it. this is their moment. If you want to read, if you were thinking about reading any of them, yes, I highly recommend. And that's it. That's all my stats for reading and a little bit of book community stuff. Just my year of books, 2019. It's over. Thank you so much if you have been subscribed for 5 years or you've been subscribed for 1 day. I think you're great. I'm glad you're here. I hope you had an amazing reading year in 2019. And I think most of us are ready for a fresh start, a new decade, and reading is just going to be amazing for 2020. I will see you tomorrow. Bye.